I absolutely love a low skill activity for when I'm feeling a bit tired and uninspired. I particularly love this one because it's great enrichment for your horse, and the nervous system changes created through being able to explore, browse, and forage help to release emotional and physical tension in your horse's body, helping them to move better and feel better. I start by going for a forage. This week's pick is cow parsley and cleavers. I'm mindful of what I'm picking, so I make sure I pick sustainably so the wildlife can still benefit. And I also make sure I'm not picking anything toxic. I often use Google Lens if I'm not sure what I'm looking at. I then chop some carrots, add some rose hips, and though Cat isn't too fussed on them, I also add a few grass nuts for a bit of chew time. But you can pick anything for your horse depending on their preferences. Next up, I head to the arena to set out some objects to stash some food on for Cat to search around and interact with. I use objects that will encourage her to explore at different heights, as well as obstacles which she can opt to move over. When doing this, I make sure not to use anything that's likely to scare her, because I don't want her to feel that in order to get the food, she absolutely has to go up to the scary object. Instead, I want her to feel settled and enabled to be curious. I also make sure that she doesn't have to navigate over an obstacle to get anything, as I'm really interested in seeing how she chooses to navigate around them and how she chooses to use her body. It's a really good fact finding mission for me to learn about her preferences. Once I've laid out the buckets, I then set about placing some food around. I want her to have chew time at each station, so it's not a frantic rush around to find the food, but I also want each station to encourage her to use her brain to navigate getting the food. So, for example, I place cow parsley under the branches to almost mimic a low lying bush, and then I place cleavers on the jump wings to encourage her to raise her head and explore a more extended position. I also put food in buckets too, as a familiar object with a context that she understands. When I'm putting the food out, I also consider the surface. Pretty much everything sticks to cleavers, including fiber surface and sand. So I make sure that I place it in such a way that cat doesn't inadvertently eat the arena surface. Likewise, with the grass nuts and the rose hips, they go in buckets so as not to get mixed in with the sand. I also put some of the cleavers and cow parsley in the buckets too, just to give her the full buffet, as it's interesting to see what she eats first and what she might choose to leave. I keep some leftovers in reserve to top up the stations as she goes along to make the activity last longer and keep her curious. Once it's all set up, it's time to bring Cat in. I chose to have Cat free in the arena because I wanted to give her the space to move around. I would also do this for horses who have anxiety around novel situations, as it means if they want to create space between themselves and an object, they can, and it means the handler won't be getting in their way, getting run over, or getting hurt if the horse chooses to exit at speed. For horses that need to build more positive associations with having a head collar, lead rope, and human attached to them, I might keep the head collar on and the handler attached. In this setting, it's really important that the handler stays well back behind the line of the shoulders so the horse can choose where they want to go. And it's really important that the handler follows the horse and doesn't direct them in any way. Because Cat was free, I took her head collar off so she didn't get caught in anything. She's a very confident horse in general, so I didn't think that running away from an object would be an issue, but because she's into absolutely everything, I did anticipate that she might like to climb over things and pull things around and perhaps put her feet on things. So Kat comes in very positively to the first obstacle and immediately wraps her jaws around the stick and then discovers the cow parsley. I noticed that while she was walking over, she had her head and neck quite low, but she did have some tension around her poll. She was sort of bobbing her head up and down a little bit. So I'd be interested to see as she goes along whether that tension gets stripped away a little bit. I was mindful when I was putting the cow parsley in that as she pulled at it, I didn't want it to be too difficult to pull the cow parsley out from under the stick so that she didn't scare herself. I also was watching her in this moment thinking, please just be careful with your feet, but also giving her the option to find out for herself so she can do silly things fairly safely. And she heads over to the bucket. It's very interesting to me that she goes straight for the cow parsley and kind of ignores the stuff in the bottom of the bucket. You can see there's almost a little bit of kind of pushing her nose around. Maybe she's tasting what's in the bucket as well while she's sort of throwing her head around. And as she walks over to the pole, there's some carrots that are placed on the pole. And it's interesting to me how she is a bit uncoordinated. So she repetitively knocks the carrots off the pole and then gets a bit bored, moves on to another object. I really like how she engages with this jump wing. I think it's quite interesting how once she's got all of the food, you'll see that she starts to spend a little bit of time smelling the jump wing and kind of exploring its texture. This is something that I don't think many horses get the opportunity to do in a domesticated setting. I think that humans are quite good at kind of dictating to the horse what they should or shouldn't be doing at any given moment in time. And so a lot of horses learn to not be curious about their environment. And so this is something that I'm really keen to keep Cat doing, keeping her curious, just so that she can be appropriately engaged within her environment and really sort of embody her lived experience. Then she moves on, head back over to the pole, and I'm watching the line of her shoulder, so where the front edge of her shoulder meets her neck, and I'm seeing that it's starting to go a little bit wobbly. I like how she places herself over the poles there, and then she sees the cow parsley tree, and that's quite fun for her. But coming back to her shoulders, seeing her, the border of her shoulder and her neck becoming a little bit wobblier and floppier indicates to me that the muscle tone's starting to downregulate and she's starting to acquire a little bit more freedom and range of motion. So with this, I would start to think or anticipate seeing her withers start to come up, perhaps. Maybe her withers might start to become a little bit higher than her croup as she's moving around. And perhaps I'd also see an increase in stride length as well. She's starting to slow down a little bit while she's eating, so it's not quite such a frantic munch. It's more of a slow, considered grazing kind of style. And then what I really like as she moves into this bucket and then away from this bucket is how she abducts her shoulders. So she steps her forelimb away from the midline and away from her body. And that's a movement that a lot of horses find quite difficult to do, particularly if they've had quite restricted shoulder range of motion or restricted stride length. See how she stepped out to the side there and then came back to the sticks because the sticks have been replenished. And this time around, she's a lot slower and a lot more considered. And then she's a little more successful getting that first carrot and then the second carrot and third carrot. She's not quite as successful. But she's not trying to sort of pack it into her mouth this time, which is nice. There's looks to be a little bit more thought about how to get the food. I think that's also really important, when we keep replenishing the food at different stations, it kind of gives a little bit more comfort to the horse, I think, a little bit more of there will be more placed here, so I don't need to be frantic about it. And interestingly, as she came up to that pole, I saw that she was successful in getting the carrot and not knocking it off of the pole. So there's a little bit more precision in her actions there. I noticed as she was walking away from that jump wing that was laying on the floor, there was a little less tension in her neck, and her shoulders are really kind of bouncing there as she heads up to that jump block on the floor. I also noticed that her windpipe is quite floppy. Her brachiocephalic muscle is also quite floppy. There's a little bit of tension around her poll. It's quite common for Iberian type horses, and is something that I would like to work on. I also am very considerate of the appropriateness of this given her age. And she starts to explore a little more around this jump block. This will be quite fun to put this at different orientations. Obviously, it's got the cups on it for poles, so I could put food in those little cups and see how she feels about exploring around that. I'm very conscious as she's kind of moving this around with her muzzle that we don't get a leg coming out and her putting a foot in it or through it, because that wouldn't be a good situation for her to be in. And it also wouldn't be terribly good for the jump block either. She's really quite interested in that. She was also doing quite a bit of smelling that had been laying around for quite a while. It also had some kind of gross water in it. But I wonder whether that was enough to get her olfactory system going and a bit curious about it. And see how she hasn't finished the treats in it. I think that's really interesting how she's gotten enrichment out of this outside of just the food value that's in it. You see, all the while she's moving around, she's choosing to abduct, to move away. Interestingly, I feel that she's abducted a little more on that left fore rather than her right fore. I find that to be quite a common pattern for her. She's a little bit more biased to load that left shoulder. And the right fore kind of remains a little bit suckered to her body, with a little less range of motion presented into it. So that's something that I would be curious to see start to change as she begins to develop and as I begin to do a little bit more with her. It's not something that I'm panicking about in this moment. I'm just noticing it. And it's interesting how, as she's kind of trying to get the food out of this, it's interesting watching her body oscillate forwards and backwards. You hear Becky's topping up the food, and so Cat chooses to go elsewhere instead. Perhaps she found it a little bit too difficult to get the cleavers out of those wings in that moment. And this looked like an easier option, but also she quite enjoys that jump block as well. Again, I think from a scent perspective, so it stands to reason that she'll go back there and keep exploring there. You can see in the background we've got the last lot of food going in because everything's been used up. So this is where we start to run the food down. Nothing else gets replaced. And then what we start to see with that is a little bit more exploratory behavior between the objects because um, she is looking to see whether more food has mysteriously appeared. For some horses who feel quite frustrated in a training setting, or frustrated in this setting, it might be that you would, before the food, ran out completely and they had the opportunity to kind of go around all of the obstacles and work out that the food was completely gone, you might choose to actually just take them out of that context. So put a head collar on and take them out of the arena. For horses who have done the exercise in order to help them to get curious, it might be a good idea to take them out of the arena at that point before they stop trying. So we've helped them to find a bit more curiosity going for a look around. We want them to be rewarded for looking. So if you're not going to replenish the food, it's a good idea to take them out of the arena or take them out of the obstacle setting before they start to feel disappointed by it.